Now, this is my little collection, and I cheated on collecting arrowheads because I mostly bought most of my collection off of eBay in one big clump. But they are kind of interesting in that they've been around a long time, and there's the American Broadhead Collectors Club, I think, recognizes over 500 different heads, all the way back from the 30s and beyond, of manufactured metal heads, basically. And these three are all from a company called Machine America, and I think up in Michigan. And go ahead, John. I'll probably go through these pretty quick because they're not that sick. And the same company, Bodkin, the Machine America actually made heads for Bodkin, so a lot of them are very similar. Bodkin went on by the Whiffin Archery Company. Go ahead. This one is a Lafond Lightning. That's just kind of the name of the company. This was an MA2. This one, I got about 10 of these in this bunch that I bought from, and I got into traditional archery. I've got a hunting bow that's a recurve like this, and I started reading up on how they used to do it with more traditional bows and arrows. Now we have such fast bows, and the broadheads go through so quickly, and but these old broadheads, just a two blader like this, actually penetrate at less power, so your arrow doesn't have to go quite as fast. And I use heads like this to take a deer. Yeah, so with the recurve. Now that's really an elite 1%, because there's not too many of them not too many of us that do it with a recurve anymore.
And that tip.
And that tip, yeah. Instead of, I went all the way back to tips that are probably 40 years old. Here's a couple that integrated plastics in their design. The core of both of these is plastics, what is that material that was back in the day? They used to make a lot of fishing equipment out of it too. No, not fiberglass. It was like a Bakelite. But a lot of those were probably Bakelite too. Those are these examples are from the 60s. These are some of my expensive ones. You know, these are collector's items because they were pretty rare. Fleetwood King of the Forest, 1947 to 61. They were made, but they, you know, none of these are precious metals. You know, they're not. But collectors will pay, you know, $40, $50 for one of these. High Precision, just another head, basically in the 60s.
Are some of those down here on your board?
Yeah, all of them are. One more. Oh, now, because these are my favorites. This is a Browning Serpentine. It had a twist to it. Really unique. It's my favorite looking. They're just nasty looking thing, you know. The good old Bear Razorhead, millions of these made, you know, that Fred Bear had stamped out and put out for cheap. Herters Company. You ever heard of the outdoor catalog Herters? You know, they got into some archery stuff too. Go ahead, John.
Serpentine is still made today.
The Browning?
Well, I don't know if it's Browning, but there's a Serpentine
that twists like that. Oh yeah.
That's made today.
Really?
Yeah.
Here's a replaceable blade. You know, everything turned to replaceable blades because, you know, if you see Fred Bear's videos, he's in camp, you know, and he's sharpening those heads. He's sharpening because the head needs to be razor sharp. It's not just a you know, your old kitchen knife in the kitchen that you really cut a tomato with. because razor sharp causes hemorrhage. You don't kill with a bow and arrow with shock. There's no shock to it really. It's all got to be hemorrhage. So they got to, and a razor cuts and bleeds and doesn't clot. So you get a much better, cleaner cut and more bleed out with a razor sharp thing. So they started saying, we gotta, because the average Joe can't sharpen a blade that's really razor sharp. So they started, even back in the 60s, coming up with some way that you could replace that blade with a brand new sharp one. Go ahead, John. Zwickey, still in business today, been producing broadheads since the 30s also. Wasp, now this is the first head that I ever shot a deer with when I was 16 in 1979. Used a Wasp Razorhead. And actually Wasp was one of the first ones of the modern ones that had replaceable blades. And those blades though were so thin, they were razor sharp, but they were so thin and they would break on a bone maybe. The other is a Rocky Mountain Razor. That was a company that was pretty big back in the day in the 80s. Satellite, still in business. Copeland, I think, and it's probably spelled wrong, because I'm not a good speller, but I believe that's a Copeland. Go ahead.
Satellite's what I used for years.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that one, this one here is an extra wide. That has a cutting, makes about a 2-inch hole, you know, compared to your average is 1 and 1.5, somewhere in that neighborhood. But that's a big one. All kinds of designs, and modern broadheads are just going, you know, everything's new and nothing's new, you know, because there's just always ideas on how to make it work better. Yeah, now this is one that I use now, the one on the right, the Thunderhead, been in production for a long time and I still like them. The other one, I'm not sure what, but I probably used that Razorhead, and that's a broadhead hole in the heart here. You see the triangular thing, and that was a crossbow. Now, I had an injury on my elbow, so I got a crossbow permit for 2 years. But I won't talk much about crossbows. I go back to this. Go ahead. Okay. There's a couple more. That's an interesting thing about collecting these things. I was hunting the internet and searching for this one with the little W's on it, and I can't find that one, but I'll find it. And then this one is very similar to ones that were made by Herters, but this one's stamped made in Japan. So I don't know if that was, you know, I don't know what that one was either. So they're both kind of unknowns for me right now. The mechanical heads are the rage now. The rage. Yeah, everybody has to shoot rage heads. The one thing too is it's just 3 of these heads here are going to cost you about $40. And so you put together, and then you can spend another, what's lighted Knox, John?
Oh gosh, they're 20 bucks a piece. 15. Terrible.
Well, yeah, or 15 for 3.
For a set.
So at least another $5. And you get another $4 in your arrow. So you don't want to miss very often, you know. Each arrow you shoot is $20, $25 nowadays you can spend on archery gear, just an arrow.
Well, don't you go and find them and
Usually you do, but sometimes you don't, you know.
find them, huh?
Huh?
Sometimes they break.
If the brush is bad, it's hard.
Right, you can't find them
Sometimes
sometimes.
they break.
Yeah, sometimes the heads themselves break. This is my best to date. He scored 152 on the Pope and Young scale. He is eligible for Missouri Big Bucks, but he's only an 8-point. So a 152 score is just huge. And the score on deer, You measure the inside spread, and you add up the length of each tine. You take the diameter of the main beam in between each tine, and you add those scores up. And one side should be equal to the other. One side is never equal to the other. Perfect, and so you get scored. If the measurements of this side are not the same as this side, the total score is deducted by the difference in those sides. This deer was only 3 inches different, and it included an 1.5 inch sticker. He's got a little sticker coming out of the brow here. 1.5 inches. So an 1.5 inch difference between one side and the other is just a perfect deer. I mean, he is just about as symmetrical and perfect as you can get, and also big and tall and tiny. So he's a beauty, and he does ingratiate my wall.
Clean shaven then.
Huh?
And you were clean shaven.
I was clean. Yeah.
Oh, that was you.
I don't know how you can even kill a deer without a beard. Tell you. But that's the end. So any questions or anything?
Go back and look at you while we're talking.
Yeah, we could stick that on there. Yeah. But yeah.
Do you collect any old stone arrowhead? I mean, flint arrowhead?
No, I can't find one to save my soul. I'm too busy looking up at deer to look down at the ground for the stone heads, you know. I've found maybe 2 in my lifetime. Yeah, I like them, but I don't hunt them. And you really gotta be dedicated to trudge through the creeks and find those arrowheads. It's a whole nother ball game. But yeah, I'd like 2 more, but I got too many other hobbies. I use carbon shafts.
You're really cheap. What happened to the old cedar?
Oh yeah, well, half of those when you bought them from the store weren't straight. You know, that's.
Well, you had to be careful.
Well, you had to be careful, and you know, it was tough to get a set that was straight, even from the factory. There'd be 1 or 2 that would be bent, you know, or have a little bit of twist to it. You know, the straightness of these carbons is such tight tolerances, and we give up on aluminum too. You know, aluminum were pretty good, but the carbon is lighter and
Aluminum would bend.
Yeah.
Slightly.
Mm-hmm.
Get a dent.
Yeah.
And then they're no good.
Yeah.
The one that you shot with a recurve, what kind of shaft were you using then?
Oh, I was using carbon shafts, but they look like they're wood. They actually have a wood finish on them. They're sold for traditional archers, and they look like wood, but they're actually carbon. Yeah, it's kind of fun that way. There's one archery company called 3 Rivers that caters almost exclusively to the guys that are into the traditional archery now.
Does Macon still have a bow hunters club?
Not that I know of. There's one down in Moberly. There's not as many archery ranges now than there were probably back in the 80s. You know, there was a lot of, we had in St. Louis County, when I was growing up, there was a field archery range through the woods, trails through the woods and up and down the hills, and targets out to 70 yards. And it was a ball, and I'd go there and practice, and I met men there that kind of give me hints and tips on how to shoot when I was first shooting a bow.
That's the type Macon used to have out at the lake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they got one down at Moberly, but it's a private club, private land. You can't use the range unless you're in the club. But it's a nice range, and it's only like $35 a year, so it's really worth it.
Do you hunt turkeys too?
I'm not with a bow much. You know, I have those tags, and I've flung some arrows at turkeys, but I've never been successful getting one. Yeah.
Do you use compound bow all the time now?
I go back and forth. This year, I'm probably using the compound, but I'm kind of.
Used your recurve last year with me.
Well, not last year, the year before
Year
last.
before last?
Yeah, last year I didn't hunt much, and I did use the compound when I hunted last year.
What's the theory behind these different shapes, like those that have the holes, you know?
A lot of the holes have to do with flight. You know, as sharp or as big as the broadhead might be, if it doesn't hit its target, if it shoots, it's difficult to practice with these. With any bladed head, they're difficult to practice with, but oftentimes they're going to shoot different than your field points, these target points. So we want them to shoot as much as similar to the target point without shooting these a lot, because we tear up targets if we do shoot them and otherwise. And that's one of the thing about the collapsible, these mechanical ones, because the head or the blades fold down, and basically you are then shooting like a target point, and you don't have to practice with them.
Well, do those slide over the ends of these?
What?
No.
No, they screw in. There's a threaded thing in the tip, so they screw in and out. You can replace them.
And the holes in the tips are so air can flow through.
Yeah,
They
so
don't go airborne.
yeah, so the wind doesn't catch them when they're
They'll catch
when they're
them and
going.
make them go off angle a little bit. So they've designed holes in them so that the air can go through them, and it supposedly keeps your tip going straighter, farther. That's what the holes are basically for, just for that.
Yeah.
And maybe a little lighter.
Yes, sir.
I've never shot a bow or anything like that,
Well, you should try it. It's wonderful.
but I get the idea that at an archery, a guy like you, that you go out in the woods and you actually hunt the deer, or do you sit in a tree and wait till they walk by and then shoot them?
Oh, I go sit in that tree and wait for them, but that's still, I call that hunting. But actually
Talking
walk.
about like stalking them, walking.
Well, they always tell
stalking.
me that's like shooting fish in a barrel.
Well, yeah,
It can be.
yeah,
It can be
Yeah.
easier. It's easier up in a tree.
yeah. It's pretty tough to walk around with a gun and shoot a deer. For my taste, I mean, if
Stalking with a bow is extremely tough.
Well, I mean, I would think that would be the
The macho thing.
yeah.
the ultimate challenge.
That'd be the.
Indian.
And it depends on the
You get
species.
bragging rights if you bring home a deer
Yeah.
doing that. Yes.
Now, you know, our white-tailed deer here I think are a lot more skittish than something like if you were an elk hunter. Very few elk hunter, bow hunters or gun, they're out walking around.
Right.
But an elk isn't an elk thinks they're the king of the mountain. And there isn't much that's going to mess with an elk. So they're not as afraid of humans being down on the ground as a whitetail. A whitetail's pretty skittish. You almost have to be up in a tree or in a blind. But sitting and waiting, yeah, is pretty much the only way to be successful.
I don't see the
There's woodsmanship involved, but not
yeah.
necessarily, you
have
know,
to think
stalking
about where to
skills.
sit, what tree, the wind, all kinds of things. So
you go out in the woods and you
there's
see where the
honey in
deer
it.
trails are, and then you sit there and wait till they come by and shoot it.
There it is.
Wouldn't you love to
That's
be
all.
That'd be the.
That's
that'd be
that's
the ultimate. Yeah.
that's all you have to
Put a
do.
bushel basket of apples out there.
Well, now they don't like that part.
Yeah,
That
Yeah.
would make it easier, but you can't do that.
yeah, yeah.
Do you
Salt
call
rock.
them in to you?
Yeah.
I used deer calls, yeah. That's another thing these guys in the early days, you know, they didn't even know deer made vocalizations back in those days. You know, but now we use calls and all kinds of things, you know, there's,
Work.
What
Yeah.
kind of call are you using?
Grunt call for bucks so you can make them turn and come back and
You
look for this other deer. There's bleat calls for does that you can call does.
You don't rattle.
You can rattle with
Yeah.
antlers. Yes, that works great too when it's in the rut.
The most I heard was a snort and they give them the next count.
Yeah, and that's not a deer call you usually want to make.
Can you tell us anything about the makeup of the bows? We were talking about the material of the shafts or the arrows.
Uh-huh. Well, this, most bows nowadays, the riser, the handle part is called the riser, and this one is wood laminated, and it's very pretty. Most risers nowadays are all solid metal, aluminum, magnesium, and very as lightweight as they can make that metal. The limbs still are laminated with wood. Some are solid fiberglass, but many of the compounds today are laminates of wood and fiberglass. They'll have a core of wood, or they'll be solid fiberglass with layers, and that's all kind of pressed and glued together. Yeah.
What kind of wood do you use?
The riser can almost be made out of any wood as long as it's pretty stable. You know, this one's probably got a little walnut in it and a little stripe of cherry in it, and you know, and I would bet this lighter color it might be a maple, a hard maple, but really the riser is just a solid thing that attaches the limbs to it. And then there's bows, recurve bows especially, that's one piece, that they laminate the limbs to the riser, so it's all one piece. And then the wood material becomes a little more crucial as to what it is and such.
I know the early Indians like to come to Missouri to get the bodark wood
Uh-huh.
for their bows.
What kind of wood?
Bodark,
Bo-
which is hedge apple wood.
Yeah, or Osage orange. And some of the best arrows were made out of Osage orange too. You think it's a gnarly tree, but you get a straight piece of Osage orange, or you cut it out of a trunk, and then you whittle it down to where it's an arrow shaft, and Osage orange arrows were a good thing too. Yeah, Osage orange. And still, people that make their own bows and make the whole thing, and they're usually like a long bow, Osage orange is definitely a crucial a crucial thing for it. George, you have one more there?
The compound bow,
Mm-hmm.
I don't get the
Meaning of the word?
is it stouter?
Well, it throws
I mean, it's more powerful?
it does a couple things. It throws the arrow faster by the same poundage that you pull out. It's like a peak. When you pull the compound back, the eccentric wheels or the cams, they turn. So they're flexing the limbs a little bit or a lot. You know, they're flexing them actually a short distance, but those limbs are so stiff. So you're putting a lot of power in there. And then once that eccentric wheel rolls over and comes back to here, you're only holding 15% of what you pull it over the hump, and the hump's here at 65 pounds, up to 70. A lot of guys are shooting 70 and maybe even 80 pounds, which is too much, but it's, you know, but their arrows are going real fast. But you pull it over that mountain, and then it holds. So I can,
It kind of like locks in.
well, it doesn't lock in,
Easy, all of a
but
sudden
it gets easy to hold. So that deer that's walking up to that apple pile, you know,
you can wait.
yeah, you can wait for it to, you can make the movement. See, if I take this bow and he's walking up, and this is a 50-pound bow where this one's only 30 pounds, and I can hold this one. You saw me hold that. Well, holding it as long as I held it here and tonight, holding it that long would be about as much as I could hold a 55 or a 60-pound bow, the one powerful enough to hunt with. This is not powerful enough to hunt deer with, really.
Now, my compound's got an 80% let off. So it's a 70-pound bull, but once I get to here, I'm only holding, what, 15
pounds.
15 pounds?
You can hold it for a little while.
And then when you let
Yeah.
go, it goes up to that 70 and
Yeah, it's
But
just
I'm
like
not
coming
holding
over that, it's coming back over that hill, and then, boom, it goes down you're on a roller coaster ride then, you know.
That let off, they call it.
So you gotta
I
get your
can
feet
wait for
braced
that deer to
against
get
that
positioned
tree.
before I have to let go. He can't on that. That.
Got to get your feet braced against the tree
Yeah, get your
in order to
feet
pull it
braced
back.
against that Made in China seat that you're sitting in.
Yeah. That's right.
Over that.
I'm pulling your chain.
over
That's
the
all
apple
right.
bucket, right?
You bet. Well, I'm basically done unless there's any more questions.
Is there any question pertaining to his program? We had a wonderful program, and we're proud to have you here. And tomorrow, when we tell people about it, they'll say, "Oh, I wish I'd have been there."
Uh-huh.
It happens every time.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, we thank you very much, Mike, and we'll have some refreshments here. Now.